Picture this. I'm standing at my kitchen window, the morning light spilling over the sink, casting long shadows across the chipped countertop. There's a stillness in the air, the kind that wraps around you like a heavy blanket, muffling even the smallest sounds. I'm Megan, 36 years old, and this is my world. A quiet, predictable slice of suburbia just outside Chicago. My days unfold in a rhythm so familiar it's almost invisible. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, hunched over my laptop in a small upstairs office, the hum of the machine my only companion most hours. Every so often, I'll sip my coffee, black, no sugar, just the way I've liked it since college, and glance out the window at our tree-lined street. It's the kind of place where nothing much happens. The neighbors wave if they see you, but they don't linger. The leaves rustle in the breeze, and the occasional car rolls by, slow and unhurried. It's peaceful, sure, but sometimes that peace feels more like a cage. My husband David is 38, and he's gone more than he's here. Business trips, he calls them, though I've stopped asking for the details. 8 years of marriage have taught me to adapt to the empty spaces he leaves behind. I've gotten used to the silence of our 2-story house, the way the floorboards creak underfoot, as if they're whispering secrets I can't quite hear. Our home is cozy in that lived-in way, furniture a little worn at the edges, walls painted a soft gray that's faded over time. But it's not perfect. The roof, for instance, has been a nagging issue. Every time it rains hard, water drips into a bucket I keep in the hallway upstairs. David's promised to fix it 100 times, but there's always something else. Another trip, another excuse. I don't push him on it anymore. What's the point? This morning, though, I found a note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in his hurried handwriting. I can almost see him writing it, rushing out the door with his suitcase, barely looking back. It read, "Some guys are coming today to check the roof. Don't worry, I've got everything under control." I stared at those words for a moment, tracing the uneven letters with my fingertip. Some guys? Who are these people? David's never been one for specifics, and I've learned to live with his vague assurances. Still, a flicker of curiosity stirred in me, mixed with a pinch of irritation. Couldn't he have told me more? A name, a time, anything? I shook my head, setting the note back down. It's just like him to leave me guessing. I told myself it didn't matter. They'd come, do whatever they needed to do, and leave. My day would go on as it always does. Coffee, designs, the quiet hum of a life on pause. But there's something about the way the morning unfolded that felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. I was upstairs in my office, the clock ticking toward 10 a.m., my focus buried in a client's logo design. The screen glowed with sharp lines and bold colors, but my mind kept wandering, tugged back to that note on the counter. I was mid-stroke with my stylus when the doorbell chimed, a sharp, insistent sound that sliced through the silence of the house. My hand froze. I wasn't expecting anyone so soon, and the sudden interruption sent a little jolt through me. I set the stylus down, my chair creaking as I stood, and took a deep breath. Strangers at the door. David's guys, I assumed. But still, my pulse ticked up a notch. I made my way downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, and paused at the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back, a little frazzled, hair in a messy bun, strands escaping here and there. I smoothed it down as best I could, tugged at the hem of my oversized sweater, and glanced at my faded jeans. Not exactly the picture of confidence, but it would have to do. I don't know why I cared so much. Maybe it was the thought of facing people I didn't know, alone in my own space. I shook off the nerves, squared my shoulders, and reached for the doorknob. When I opened the door, 2 men stood on the porch, their presence filling the frame like they owned the place. The first one caught my eye immediately. Broad-shouldered, early 30s, with a cocky grin that seemed permanently etched on his face. A tool belt hung low on his hips, clinking softly as he shifted his weight. "Hey there, I'm Jake," he said, his voice smooth, almost too casual. The second man, leaner and a bit older, maybe mid-30s, stepped forward with a scruffy beard framing a wide, toothy smile. "And I'm Ryan," he boomed, his voice loud enough to echo down the street. "We're here for the roof. Mind if we come in and take a look?" I nodded, stepping aside, but they barely waited for my response, stomping in with muddy boots, leaving faint tracks on the entryway rug. I mumbled a polite, "Hi, nice to meet you," but they didn't seem to hear or care. Their rough, confident energy clashed with the quiet of my home, like a storm rolling into a still pond. I felt small in their shadow, my space suddenly not my own. I retreated back to my office, trying to sink back into my work, but their voices carried through the walls, low and gruff, as they moved around outside. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. Bold, unapologetic. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang again, pulling me from my half-hearted focus. I sighed, pushing my chair back, and made my way downstairs again, the echo of that second doorbell chime still lingering in my ears. When I opened the door this time, a third man stood there, taller than the others, with a stern face and piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. "I'm Travis," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like he didn't waste words. "I'm with Jake and Ryan. We've been checking the roof outside." I nodded, stepping back to let him in, noticing how his heavy boots left more dirt on my rug. The house felt even smaller now, crowded with their presence, and I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. Not long after, the three of them came in from their initial inspection, their boots tracking fresh mud across my living room rug as they approached me. I was standing near the couch, trying to keep my composure, when Jake flashed that same cocky grin I'd noticed earlier. "Hey, Megan, mind showing us where the leak's most noticeable inside the house?" he asked, his tone casual, but with an edge that made it feel more like a demand than a question. "We need to see the damage up close to figure out what we're dealing with." I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the edge of the couch. David usually handled stuff like this. Home repairs, contractors, all of it. I'm not used to leading strangers through my own space, especially not men who carry themselves with such raw confidence. But their eyes were on me, waiting, and there was something in their insistent, almost commanding tone that made it hard to say no. "Sure," I mumbled, forcing a small smile. "I can show you." My heart was thumping a little faster as I led them toward the stairs, their heavy footsteps echoing behind me. I could feel their presence, close and unyielding, as we climbed up to the second floor. I pointed to the attic door at the end of the hallway, a narrow wooden frame that hadn't been opened in months. "It's up there," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. I reached for the handle and tugged, but the door wouldn't budge, jammed tight from years of neglect. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment as I pulled harder, to no avail. Ryan let out a low chuckle, stepping closer. "Guess we'll have to find another way up there," he said, his voice carrying a teasing lilt that made my skin prickle. I swallowed, trying to think. "There's the kitchen balcony," I offered after a moment. "There's a ladder access to the roof from there, and you can see the water stains on the ceiling nearby." They nodded, and I turned to lead them back downstairs, the narrow hallway feeling even tighter with their bulk shadowing me. We stepped out onto the kitchen balcony, the cool morning air brushing against my skin, a sharp contrast to the heat building inside me from nerves I couldn't quite name. I pointed upward to the ceiling overhang just above us, where faint brown water stains marred the surface. "That's where it's worst," I said, my voice steadier now that we were outside, away from the confined spaces of the house. "You can see the damage right there." Jake moved in close behind me, closer than I expected, and I could feel the warmth of his breath on my neck as he leaned in to look up at the spot I'd indicated. My body tensed, every nerve suddenly on edge, and then, without warning, His arms slid around my waist, pulling me back against him in a grip that was firm, almost possessive. My breath caught in my throat, shock freezing me in place for a heartbeat. What was happening? My mind raced, but my body didn't move, caught in a storm of confusion and something else, something electric. Before I could process it, Ryan stepped forward, his hand brushing along the side of my neck, slow and deliberate, sending a shiver down my spine. His voice dropped to a whisper, so low I couldn't make out the words over the pounding in my ears, but the intent was clear, heavy with suggestion. Travis stood a few steps away, his cold, unreadable eyes fixed on me, not moving, just watching with that icy stare that seemed to pin me in place. My heart was a wild drum in my chest, every beat echoing in my ears as the world tilted under me. The balcony, the cool air, the faint rustle of leaves, it all faded into a blur. I was caught in a web I hadn't seen coming, tangled in a moment that felt both wrong and dangerously alive. Jake's grip tightened for a fleeting second, his breath hot against my ear, murmuring something I couldn't quite catch, something that made my skin flush with heat. Ryan's touch lingered, tracing a path that sent sparks through me, a silent invitation I didn't know how to answer. And Travis, his silence was louder than any words, his gaze cutting through the haze, making me feel exposed in a way I couldn't escape. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. Jake stepped back, releasing me with a casual ease, as if he hadn't just turned my world upside down. Ryan pulled away too, a smirk playing on his lips as he cracked a joke, something about the weather being hotter than expected. His tone was light, almost mocking, like none of this was out of the ordinary. Jake fished a cigarette from his pocket, lighting it with a flick of his lighter, the sharp scent of tobacco curling into the air. He took a long drag, exhaling a plume of smoke that drifted lazily over the balcony railing, his eyes glinting with amusement. Travis didn't move, didn't speak, just kept staring at me with that unblinking intensity, like he could see every thought racing through my mind. I stood there, breathless, my chest heaving as if I'd run a mile, my hair a mess from where the wind, or maybe a stray hand, had tousled it. My clothes felt askew, and I could barely think straight, the weight of what had just happened crashing over me like a tidal wave. I fumbled with the hem of my sweater, my hands trembling as I tried to smooth it down, to pull myself together. My fingers wouldn't cooperate, shaking so badly I nearly dropped the fabric. I couldn't look at them, couldn't meet their eyes, not after whatever that was. My face burned, a mix of shame and confusion swirling in my gut. I need to get back to work, I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper, cracking on the last word. I didn't wait for a response, didn't dare glance at their faces to see if they were laughing or judging or worse. I turned on my heel, stumbling over the threshold as I hurried back inside, the glass door sliding shut behind me with a soft thud. The kitchen enveloped me, but instead of feeling safe, it felt suffocating, the walls pressing in like they knew what I'd done. The air was thick, stale, and the glasses of water I'd poured earlier sat on the counter, untouched, now warm and forgotten, beads of condensation pooling at their bases. I staggered to the sink, gripping the edge with both hands, my knuckles whitening as I tried to steady myself. My breath came in shallow gasps, my mind a chaotic storm of thoughts I couldn't pin down. What had I let happen out there? How had I lost control so completely? I stared down at the stainless steel basin, my reflection distorted in its surface, a stranger looking back at me with wide, haunted eyes. I barely recognized myself. The faucet dripped, a slow, rhythmic plink that echoed in the silence, each drop a reminder of how everything had slipped through my fingers in mere minutes. I needed to focus, to breathe, to push this mess out of my head, but my heart wouldn't slow, wouldn't stop hammering against my ribs. That's when I noticed the kitchen window, slightly ajar, just a crack, enough for a faint breeze to slip through and nudge the curtain. It swayed gently, a ghostly motion that drew my eye. I frowned, a flicker of unease cutting through the fog in my mind. Had I left it open? I couldn't remember. My legs felt heavy as I crossed the room, each step deliberate, almost reluctant, as if part of me knew I shouldn't look too closely. But I did. I pushed the curtain aside, my fingers trembling as I peered out into the backyard. That's when I saw him, David, standing there near the edge of the lawn, half hidden by the shadow of the old oak tree. His posture was rigid, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his face turned just enough that I couldn't read his expression. My stomach dropped like a stone. He wasn't supposed to be home. He'd left for another trip, or so I thought. How long had he been there? Had he seen everything? My mind spiraled, replaying those charged moments on the balcony, the way Jake's hands had claimed my space, Ryan's lingering touch, Travis's piercing stare. The thought of David witnessing it all made my knees weak, a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. I stumbled back from the window, my breath hitching as I tried to make sense of it. Was he waiting for me to notice him? Was he planning to come in and say something? I didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. The rest of the day dragged on in agonizing slow motion. I couldn't focus on anything. My laptop sat untouched, the logo design forgotten, the screen dimming as I paced the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, made me jump, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. I kept expecting David to barge through the door, his voice sharp with accusation, his eyes burning with something I couldn't face. But he didn't. The silence was worse somehow, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed down on me hour after hour. I tried to call him, my hands shaking as I dialed his number over and over. Each unanswered ring was a punch to the gut, amplifying the dread pooling inside me. Voicemail after voicemail, my messages grew more desperate, my voice cracking as I pleaded for him to just pick up, to talk to me, to give me something, anything, to hold on to. But there was nothing. Just the cold, automated tone of his greeting cutting through my words. In my head, I rehearsed apologies, stringing together excuses and explanations, but they all sounded hollow, even to me. How could I explain what had happened out there? How could I justify the way my body had reacted, caught in a moment I hadn't fully resisted? The shame burned hot in my chest, mingling with fear of what he might already know. By the time evening rolled around, I was a wreck, my eyes red from staring at the clock, watching the minutes tick closer to 7 p.m. That's when I heard the front door open, the sound slicing through the stillness like a blade. My heart stopped as I froze in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter for support. David stepped inside, his movements slow and deliberate, his face a mask I couldn't decipher. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just walked past the living room and into the dining area where we usually shared our quiet meals. In his hand, he carried a small tablet, its black screen glinting under the overhead light. My throat tightened as he set it down on the table with a soft thud, the sound echoing in my ears like a gavel. He gestured for me to sit, his hand moving with a calm that unnerved me more than any outburst could have. I sank into the chair across from him, my legs barely holding me up. My voice trembled as I opened my mouth to speak, to spill out one of those rehearsed apologies, but the words stumbled over themselves, clumsy and broken. David, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for... He cut me off with a quiet, almost gentle, just watch. His tone was flat, devoid of anger or warmth, and it sent a shiver down my spine. My hands shook as I reached for the tablet, my fingers fumbling over the smooth surface before I managed to press play. The screen flickered to life, and my breath caught in my throat as the video began. It was grainy, the quality rough around the edges, but clear enough to make out every detail. As the video played on that small tablet screen, my world crumbled frame by frame. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even as every muscle in my body screamed to stop, to smash the device, to run. The footage captured everything from earlier on the balcony, every touch, every whisper, every moment I'd been caught in that storm of confusion and forbidden heat. It was all there, laid bare in shaky, grainy detail, as if someone had been hiding just out of sight, watching, recording. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat as I saw myself through a stranger's lens, vulnerable and exposed in ways I couldn't fathom. When the screen finally went black, the silence in the room was suffocating, heavier than any words could ever be. I sat frozen, my hands still gripping the edges of the tablet, my knuckles white as bone. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. My mind was a void, a dark, endless spiral of shock and shame. David's voice cut through the stillness, low and eerily calm, like a whisper in a graveyard. "I thought you'd like it. You looked happy." Those words slithered into my ears, twisting like a knife in my chest. Happy? The revulsion hit me like a wave, nausea rolling through me as I processed what he meant. He wasn't just acknowledging what he'd seen. He was claiming it, shaping it into something he'd orchestrated, something he'd wanted. His tone carried a sick kind of satisfaction, as if he'd planned this moment, though he offered no explanation, no glimpse into the why or how. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shatter that calm facade with every ounce of rage and hurt boiling inside me. But I couldn't. My tongue felt like lead, my throat tight and raw. My mind was a storm, a chaotic mess of disgust at his words, guilt for what I'd let happen, and a bone-deep fear of what this meant for us, for me. I didn't ask questions. I couldn't find the words. Not then. Not in that suffocating dining room with the overhead light casting harsh shadows across his unreadable face. My thoughts churned, replaying his comment over and over, each repetition making my skin crawl. How could he think I'd wanted any of this? How could he sit there, so composed, while my entire reality fractured around me? I stared at him, searching for something, anger, betrayal, anything. But his expression gave nothing away. Then, without another word, he stood, the scrape of his chair against the floor a jarring sound in the silence. He picked up the tablet, tucking it under his arm as if it were nothing more than a mundane object, and walked toward the stairs. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing in the quiet house as he ascended, leaving me alone at the table. I didn't move, didn't call after him. I just sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me. The space where he'd been now a void that mirrored the one inside me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my sense of safety, my understanding of David, had been shattered in the span of a single day. 8 years of shared history, of quiet mornings and late-night conversations, of promises whispered in the dark, all felt like a lie now. I'd always known David kept parts of himself hidden, tucked away behind those vague excuses and long absences, but I'd never imagined something like this. What was this? A game? A test? A twisted way of asserting control? I didn't know, and the not knowing gnawed at me, a relentless ache that settled deep in my bones. My hands trembled as I pressed them flat against the table, trying to ground myself, but the smooth wood offered no comfort. The house, once a sanctuary despite its flaws, now felt like a prison, every creak and shadow a reminder of how little I truly understood about the man I'd shared it with. I thought back to earlier, to that fleeting thrill I'd felt on the balcony, that dangerous spark that had coursed through me in those charged moments. It had been intoxicating, a rush that both thrilled and terrified me, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.